Hey guys, it's me, Mrs. Lance again. We are doing our part two of why history matters, and really this part is based on how we think as a historian. So, although we are going to, in the future, our sixth grade curriculum, look at um, each continent and its history, like I said, we're kind of catching up on some of our fifth grade standards and just getting our brains ready to look at um, a little bit of our American past, our American history, and then we'll dive, like I said, into our sixth grade standards. So today we really want to know, how do we think like a historian? Okay. And the reason we need to think like a historian is because we want to be critical thinkers. What does that mean? It means that we uh, have evidence for historical events. It means that we question uh, the details of those events. And I mean it in a good way. We want to discover, explore, learn more about those events with questions. Okay. Now that we're in sixth grade, we're going to try to use more questions when we learn. So it's not me giving you information, but it's me giving you the tools to ask questions yourself and explore. So here are some tools of a historian. We have three tools actually. We're going to cover two today. So primary sources, secondary sources, and then we also have oral history. Um, oral oral history would be like stories that of history or traditions, that kind of thing that we pass on from generation to generation. So let me say it right. La Llorona, not the movie, okay? The story, or La Chupacabra, that kind of stories that we pass from parents to children, children to their children, and so on. So that's one source. And then we have primary and secondary sources. These are two things that we're really going to focus on today. So a primary source. And as I've said before, just pause the video whenever you need to so you can get your notes in. So a primary source. How do we know that something really happened? Okay, so I want you to think about an event in your life that you witnessed. What did you see? It may have been um, a sibling walking for the first time. It may have been, I had some other students share, like they got hurt. There was someone who hit their jaw and they have a scar there. How do you know that happened? Because remember, your story is history. So think about an event in your life that you saw, that you would be a witness to say, hey, I saw that. I know it happened. Okay. So for me, I saw my first day at TLCA. Okay. So I would be a primary source for that. And what is a primary source? I have this part filled in for you. It is a document or object created by someone who was involved in or witnessed an event. Okay. So you want to have someone who saw it, who was involved in it, or was a witness to the event. And I'm going to use a better example. On September 11th, okay, 2001, I was in Spanish class in high school, and someone said, turn on the news, which we never watched in Spanish class. So we turned it on, and I saw two planes going into the Twin Towers in New York City. And so although I was not in New York City physically seeing it with my own two eyes, I was around when that event happened. I saw it on television, and I was alive during that time. So I could be a primary source, okay, for the 9/11 attack. Okay, do we have documents that give us information about it? Yes. Or do we have objects? If you go to the memorial for the 9/11 Twin Tower attack, you'll see that they have, different types of objects that can show, okay, this really happened. We have proof. All right. And so what would be a characteristic of this? How do we know that we have a primary source? Okay, whether it be a document like a paper, or a person, or an object. Okay, we know that the creator witnessed or was involved with the event. So this is where you're going to add to your notes. The creator witnessed or was involved with the event. Okay, so you guys were not alive during that time. You're not quite that old. So you would not be able to be a primary source. Your parents, most likely, yes, of all of them, I'm going to say, would be a primary source if they were involved with or witnessed it in some way. Okay, so what are some examples of primary sources? Okay, what are some things that we take information from that time period? We could have letters, we could have speeches, we could actually have audio or video. Okay, and that's more of a modern primary source. We obviously didn't have that when, like, say, Abraham Lincoln was around, but we do have photographs, okay, some from the 1800s, okay. We have like artifacts. Okay, so how do we know what kind of tools Native Americans would use? We have artifacts, we have objects from that time period that show us, okay, oh, this is what their artifact was made out of, or their object, their tool was made out of, and gives us some insight into that time. So there's all different kinds of things: letters, speeches, audio, video, photographs, anything that has a date is a really good indication it's a primary source. Okay. All right. So how do we know what a secondary source is then, if we're going to confirm, okay, this event really happened? Well, we're going to look at whether it's an interpretation of information written after the event. Is it a review or critique? Okay, so how do we know that something really has the characteristic of a secondary source? So we know that if it was a person, they did not witness or was not alive during the event. So if something was written after, okay, or it could be an object. If the object was made after that time period, it's not a primary source. So that sounds a little vague, but you'll get it in just a second. So what would be an example of a secondary source? Well, a biography. Okay, it's not written by someone who actually lived during that time, but it's written by another person. So biography, the story of someone's life written by someone else. Okay, we could also use textbooks. If you look in our social studies textbooks, which we probably won't see too much this year. They're filled with primary sources giving us information. Someone is interpreting them. So biographies, textbooks, we have encyclopedias. Okay. Anything that is taking information and giving us an interpretation. Okay, so that's kind of our key thing. These authors here weren't necessarily alive or witnessing these events. They're taking primary sources, photographs, letters, speeches, etc., and using that to summarize information for you. Okay, so those are our examples of secondary sources. Now, once we get those as historians, how do we know that our sources are giving us good information? Okay, and I'm going to give you an example. I'll use a classroom example really quickly. We want to ask questions, okay? Good historians ask questions. We want to ask about sourcing. So we want to say, who wrote this? Is it reliable? Okay, so one of the students shared that they witnessed their family had been in a car accident. They were a toddler. They do have memories of it. Okay, so they were 2 or 3. They remember it. Well, let's say that 2 or 3-year-old, or your event, if you were 2 or 3, drew a picture of the car crash. Okay, is it going to be reliable? It's a great question. All right, so why? Why was it written? Okay. All right, if you're 2 or 3, you might just be kind of processing it, but why did someone write it? Was there a purpose, a motive behind that? Okay. Let's say the police officer who writes up the crash report writes it. Okay. Well, we obviously that's not a 2 or 3-year-old, so we're going to say, okay, it should probably be accurate because a police officer wrote it, right? Okay. What about if he waits 2 months to write the crash report? It's still a document, right? It's written by someone reliable. Okay. But does the timing affect reliability? Okay. If someone waits a long time afterwards, it is possible, they might not remember all the details. So think about your event. Did you remember all the details from that event now that you're older, especially if it was a while ago? So what else do we want to look at? We want to look at corroboration. Corroboration just means that there are other documents, other sources that confirm the details. Okay. Do other documents or sources give the same details, or do they give different details? Okay. We also want to know what events happened before. Okay. These events don't just happen. What events happened before? We want to think about context. What's happening while we do this? Okay. The other thing you want to do is be a close reader. So what clues does a document give me? What is it trying to tell me? And the other one you want to think about is what words persuade me? Are they using certain words to try to get you to think a certain way? Think about those really cute, sad animal commercials where they say, oh, animals are being neglected and abused, and it really just brings all our emotions out. They're using, although it's true, they're using certain words to try to persuade me. So we have to be a close reader and think about what kind of ways or thoughts are they trying to persuade me with. So these are your notes. Just remember to pause it whenever you need it. Okay.